Explain like I'm 5. Why does Japan still have a declining, low birth rate, even though the Japanese government has enacted several nationwide policies to tackle the problem? My knowledge has to do with South Korea, but their problem is even worse than in Japan. The programs the government passes that try to alleviate the problem are either tackling the wrong problem or is just plain insufficient. In the cities, nobody young enough to have kids can afford to own. The tiny bit they get from the government isn't nearly enough to change that. Nobody wants to try to raise a family of 4 or more in some tiny one-bedroom. Because the incentives to have kids are still weaker than the reasons not to. I'll give you $5 to buy a new car from me at full sticker price. Nah. I'll answer honestly, it's because they haven't. They've cut allowances program, about few $100s a month, for couples with newborn children back in 2012, when there was a major change in the government. It has only been recently reenacted. People were complaining that Japan had shortages of childcare centers, so there were a long line of people in the waiting list, but the government still hasn't done anything about it. Childcare center staff are underpaid. Traditional gender roles that men go to work and women do household chores are still alive and well, even though nowadays majority of women work. Among OECD countries, Japanese men spend one of the least time with chores and child rearing. Japanese women have to work and on top of that do all the chores and child rearing. Hence Japanese women sleep less and are overworked. Men getting paid paternity leave is still uncommon. Economic uncertainties about the future, like whether they will be able to receive pensions. Real wages in Japan remain stagnant and hadn't grown in 30 years. It has become too expensive and a luxury to raise a child. To tackle this problem, the government raises consumption taxes for the people but decrease taxes for corporations. Change to the extremely conservative government with an agenda in 2012 meant that the only thing they thought was needed to tackle the declining population problem was to return to the good old days of traditional Japanese values, but not enacting practical policies that could tackle the problem. So what does Japan do to tackle the declining population problem? They are doing the exact opposite of what they ought to be doing. Or more accurately, they are doing nothing and hoping that the problem will go away or solve on its own. They simply don't really care that much as long as their own class of elites can live well off. I saw an interesting program about dating in Japan. There's quite a bit of intimacy issues and people simply staying single even later in life. Many seem to consider being together as more of a hassle, or simply don't have the time to spend with a partner. One woman was actually marrying herself so she could have a wedding. Pictures and all by herself.